Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting. I'd like to call the Public Works Committee meeting to order. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. The land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wide stewardship of the lands on which we live. Begin with disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest as we begin? Seeing none, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda, please? Got Councillor Devoli, seconded by Member Spink. Resolved that the agenda for the May 28th, 2025 Public Works Committee meeting be approved. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Receipt of previous minutes. Can I get a mover and seconder to get the previous minutes, to receive the previous minutes? Councillor Kristanji, seconded by Councillor Howe. I saw a hand down there. Resolved that the minutes of April 30th, 2025 Public Works Committee be received. Any questions or comments on those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. We have no delegations and we have no consent reports. So the first discussion report this evening is DPW 2509, Grimsby Veterans Mural. Can I get a mover and seconder to get this report on the floor for discussion? Got Member Rady and Councillor Howe. Brandon, please go ahead and explain the report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Public Works Committee and Council recently approved a couple of initiatives to honor our Grimsby veterans. This include designating a portion of Clark Street as Veterans Way and supporting the installation of some commemorative banners along that same road. We had a separate direction from council asking staff to consider opportunities for public art, prioritizing themes towards our veterans. The current report speaks to the staff's recommendations in support of that second motion. Previous motion we addressed at the earlier meeting, April meeting, a month ago or so. Staff identified the Grimsby Museum as a candidate location for a Remembrance Day veterans-themed wall mural. Specifically, staff felt that the south-facing wall that's immediately adjacent to the existing cenotaph would be a great location to consider such a mural. So we provided a few examples of similarly themed murals that have been painted in a few other municipalities in Ontario, and I think one is in British Columbia, and they're included in the report just as an example. I think those were all done at the Legions, but in this case we have a blank wall right beside the cenotaph that we thought would be a good place for us to provide that support. The museum is in need of foundation repairs, which would interfere with our ability to do that work or to get the mural in place for Remembrance Day 2025. But we are, however, recommending that a capital project be established as part of the 2026 budget that would facilitate the work in time for Remembrance Day of 2026. We anticipate the cost to be around $15,000, and again, we would consider that as part of the capital project as part of our 2026 budget. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Member Spink.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is actually more a question for you or for the clerks. I have no problem with the town supporting a mural honoring our veterans. I'm just wondering if this should be under the mandate of Public Works or if it should be under the mandate of community services that generally handle public art. I do understand that we're addressing street name signs and banners on public right-of-way, but there may be some policies that we are not aware of.
Public Works is also responsible for facilities management, which I think is what, no? Okay, go ahead, Brandon.
Sorry, just to clarify, so the original motion came in specifically asking us to consider things like painted ladder, crosswalks and things like that. So as part of that review, the question or the opportunity came up, or suggestion, that's the word I'm looking for. Suggestion came up about, well, what if we can do a mural rather than something painted on the ground? I think there was some conversation about whether it was appropriate to walk on Remembrance Day things versus painting something on the wall. So I took that away as I'm going to review a bunch of things, and I consulted with our facilities director, our community services director, Sarah Sweeney, and included the museum staff and as well as our art gallery staff in that conversation. So, yeah, I guess, yes, realistically, painting on facilities is a community services thing. They have been consulted, and we've developed this report in cooperation with each other. I'm not sure if Sarah signed the report, but I do have her blessing to bring it forward. So yeah, so that's kind of how it came about and why we were bringing it back. But ultimately, it would be handed back to community services as part of that budget process.
Well, I guess I still feel like we maybe are stepping on the toes of the Community Services Committee. So, especially because we're talking about this is going to be delayed until next year because of the foundation work. Would it be appropriate to refer it to the Community Services Committee? I'm looking for guidance on people who've been in council longer. If it makes sense for us just to vote on it, I'm okay with that too.
Brendan, did you want to speak to that, or?
Oh, I mean, I guess as far as it going to the committee, I can't speak to that. Like, it's not obviously not my call. The motion was directed to staff, and between Sarah and myself, we thought it was appropriate to come back through the Public Works Committee. It kind of was generated that way. In terms of councils, ultimately this. Recommendation does go before council, and ultimately council will need to decide whether that it's appropriate and whether there's a support there. So I'm happy to take direction from the committee or council if they feel that it's appropriate to go through another committee rather than Public Works.
I think in the end, it has to go through council ultimately anyway. Sending it to community services for information that this is what's coming down the pipes, I think is a good idea, so that they're aware of it. But I don't think that it requires their approval. So I think somewhere between those two, sending it for information is the right answer. So if you want to forward it to Sarah and have her bring it to the Community Services Committee, that'd be great. Councillor Davoli.
Thank you, Chair. Two comments. I just wanted to say that in this topic still, when you get to the end of the report, it was reviewed and signed off by Sarah Sweeney as well. So she's fully cognizant and obviously part of the team. That's not to say it can't still be a team effort by the time we get to 2026. And yeah, I think when we set up the standing committees, the idea was to not have things go simultaneously to two committees, that gets to be a real conflict. So as I recall, the thinking was that it would go to one committee. If it had an impact on another department, we work together, and when it gets to council, council covers everything. So I'm okay just the way we're handling it today. I do just have one question about where the actual mural will go, and maybe it's just the way the red arrow is on the picture. I'm talking about page 4 of the report and the picture of the cenotaph and the south walls of the museum. And I know you said, well, this would be on the wall closest to the cenotaph, but I feel like the red arrow points to the west wall, the west-south wall, as opposed to the east one. So I just want to be clear. I know on one of those walls, they used to always drape, I'm going to say, the million poppies that they have, and I'm sure they've kept it from year to year. I thought that was on the right wall, but I just want to be sure I'm clear on which wall this would go on.
Yeah, just to clarify, it looks like my arrow is not pointing to the right wall. either I missed that in editing, or I'm going to blame the software when it converted from Word to, but you're correct. Where the blue dot is where the arrow should be pointing to. So yes, it's the south-facing wall. And yes, you are correct. That I think that's the wall where they do the poppy, whatever it is. Sorry, I don't know the term. But Sarah is aware of that and said that we would work with that group who does that just to make sure it's incorporated and not in conflict with it. So hopefully they, what do you call it, we complement each other rather than, yeah.
That's all. I just wanted clarification on which wall it was. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none. Museum staff has been consulted. They're all on board. Everybody's, that was my only question. Okay, so I have a resolution. Resolved that report DPW 2509 titled Grimsby Veterans Mural dated May 28th, 2025 be received, and that the Public Works Committee recommends council support the installation of a Remembrance Day and/or Canadian Veterans themed mural at the Grimsby Museum, and that the Public Works Committee recommends council support the cost for this work be put forward as a capital project in 2026 budget for approval to allow the mural to be completed and unveiled in time for Remembrance Day on November 11th, 2026. That's moved by Member Rady, seconded by Councillor Howe. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Second and final discussion report is DPW 2510, 2024 Annual DWQMS Infrastructure Review Report. Can I get a mover and seconder to get this report on the floor, please? Moved by Member Spink, seconded by Councillor Kristangi. Brandon, please go ahead.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'm going to defer to Ben on this one.
Okay. I prefer Ben anyway, so.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everybody. Through you, the chair, as part of our annual requirement under the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard, or DWQMS, we've completed the 2024 infrastructure review of our town's drinking water system. The report in front of you provides an overview of the water infrastructure, including maintenance activities, water quality monitoring outcomes, and the planned capital improvements. Overall, our system is performing well, with 17 of 17 service levels being met, and the vast majority of performance indicators being achieved. We did exceed 2 targets, one for unaccounted water loss and the number of drinking water quality complaints, or inquiries, I should say, both of which continue to be addressed through our preventative maintenance and capital projects. The report also highlights the town's replacement strategy for aging cast iron water mains, with 2 major projects currently in the design phase with construction plan for 2025 and 2026 respectively. Lastly, the report mentions the water meter replacement project, which is part of a larger program called our Water and Wastewater Billing Modernization Program. The project will see the replacement of about 2,200 water meters in 2025 and 2026, with those capable of remote and real-time monitoring and data collection. That's all I really wanted to speak about this evening. So thank you all for your time. I'm happy to receive any feedback or questions.
I'm making notes as we go along, because that way, when we get to council, I can just refer back to my notes instead of, so Councillor DeVoe, I apologize, go ahead.
I'm sure the clerk is taking good notes. Thank you. And I just have a number of questions, Ben, so if you could bear with me as I go through them. The unaccounted water loss, that percentage is quite high. And I remember in my history when it has hit some of similar numbers, and it all went back to that water meter, that the region's water meter between Lincoln and Grimsby. And the miscalibration on it. We already have a miscalibration issue between all of us from something else. So I guess my question really on this one is, do we have some idea what's causing that? Could it be something like a miscalibration again on the region's water meter? And related to that, of course, is, what are we going to do about it, right?
Yeah, maybe I'll step in and take that one, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Chair. So, so we do have an estimated water loss, unaccountable water loss of, 9.27% in 2024. Believe it or not, that's actually a good number for drinking water distribution systems. So I know 10% sounds about high. We've set a target of around 5. But generally, if you look at other industry or other municipal or other drinking water systems, it's actually a decent number. In terms of the causes for the water loss, I can speak to the programs that we have in place to try to reduce those costs. So we do an annual leak detection program, essentially where we do sound monitoring of all of our metal water main systems, water pipes, cast iron pipes and ductile iron pipes. And we put listening devices on there to see if it's making loud sounds. That points to a possible leak source, and then we would, tie in that leak source and then do repairs if needed. In terms of the region's water meter or water meters being an issue, there's nothing that jumps out at us. The difference between drinking water and wastewater is can be tied to the fluctuation in rain, because the groundwater gets into the sanitary sewer system, and our values can go up and down, and it's difficult to pinpoint changes because they or reading errors based on the region's measuring, because it can fluctuate so much as part of the based on the seasonal rain. In this case, water is pretty consistent in terms of if there was a large spike. I think it jumped up. I can't remember the last time, but I think it was above 10, where my predecessor was not sleeping at night trying to figure out what it was, and it ended up finding out that it was a water main leak on a regional water main. So anyways, I don't think there are any obvious signs that we have seen to date, but just maybe to provide some reassurances. I know 10% loss is, it sounds like a lot, but in terms of a standard, it's actually pretty good.
Thank you. My second question has to do with that page 3 again on the water quality index and people calling with complaints about taste, odor, or smell. And the comment there was, sometimes new residents come in and aren't used to it, and they have to experience the change in taste, right? And I realized we had a few complaints in that regard. I guess 2 questions. Do we know if those complaints were from new residents moving in? And then I have a corollary to that as well.
Through you, Chair, to answer the question, I can't speak to the individual complaints and whether or not we did a QA/QC on whether they were new residents, but it's something that we can take away and go into each individual one of those complaints to get the details from any communication that was had with the complainant.
My related question to that is that when I think of, 30,000 people living in this town, and for the sake of tonight, I'll say a third of those are children who probably aren't calling with complaints about the water. So 20,000 people, 365 days of the year, that's a pretty big number. I can't do it in my head without my calculator, but 10 complaints, that seems really low. I feel like we've set the standard and the goal really high. And I think we're beating it by a million miles when I think of how many people and how many days and 10 complaints. I feel like that's very minor.
Brandon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to that, I think anecdotally, but maybe Thomas can speak to this, but my sense in talking to Mike Osasavich, our environmental services supervisor who gets all these phone calls, is the sense is new people moving to the area, sometimes from Hamilton, who uses a different type of disinfectant. They use chloranamines instead of chlorine, and chlorine is a different taste or different odor. So a lot of the calls are, hey, I smell chlorine, and we would say, yes, that's actually a good thing because it means the water's clean. So, yeah, and in terms of the target that we set, the level of service target is set on based on our kind of historic trends. So it's, hey, we get 5, 6, 7 calls a year. Let's make our target 10 kind of thing, right? So we could set the target at 0, or we could set the target at 25 and really win. But it was based on on historic trends. Did you want to add something, Thomas?
Yeah, sorry, through your chair. The only thing I would just add to this is, to Brandon's point, these being kind of targets that we've picked, these are not targets that are regulated, the levels of service and the OPIs that we have in here. But just on the customer calls or complaints as well, the numbers are low, but we do find even when we have complaints coming in, a lot of them are plumbing related. So they're internal to, say, someone calling from 385 Hunter, like in a condo building. So the water quality going in that building is fine, but it's an internal plumbing issue, whether it's whatever it could be. The faucet they have on there is putting bubbles into it, so it looks like the water's cloudy. If you let it sit, it dissipates. So a lot of the calls are actually not related to water quality, but they're kind of an internal plumbing issue. We don't filter that type of stuff out here, but just a big chunk of calls that we get are actually more related to plumbing as opposed to water quality. This is a level of service that we have talked about probably every year about how we could maybe better utilize this, because it doesn't give us a true maybe understanding of water quality, because the complaints most times are not actually related to an issue with the water. It's like a flavor thing or bubbles in the water or something of that nature.
Thanks, everybody. Any other questions? Member Eady?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Could you just explain a dead end to me, just because I'm struggling. I can't remember what it is. I probably have heard it, but could you elaborate on what a dead end is? Because I don't think that's a good thing, but I don't think it's an issue for us either, is it, right?
Through you, Chair, I guess the simplest way of putting a dead end is just the water main isn't looped. So it's just a physical end to a water main, so you could have stagnant water potentially sitting there. So we have a dead end flushing program whereby environmental services will flush hydrants or other infrastructure to get the water moving through that dead end.
Were you going to say something, Thomas? Did you? Anybody else down here? Go ahead. Member Murphy.
There we are. Curious about hydrant flushing. I'm just wondering where that fits in the unaccounted water loss.
Through you, the chair, we have a calculator essentially that builds in some notions about how much water we're using for different activities, such as maintenance. So annually, we know an estimated amount of volume that we are using for hydrant flushing. So that would be accounted for water loss that is not through a meter, for instance.
So in other words, that is not part of the unaccounted. It's not part of this 9 point whatever percent, if that makes sense. Member Murphy. Okay. So I've got Councillor Davoli and then Member Smink. And Councillor Davoli, go ahead.
Thank you. It is something that has come up before, but I think it's well worth repeating, and I'm just going to ask Mr. Wortman or one of the staff to just bring us up to speed again on our water meter replacement plan and our water billing. And I do like to keep talking about this. So we're replacing 2,200 or so water meters in order to make them compliant so they can be read by radio frequency, and then our water billing software will go in after that. But could you talk, I guess, in a little more detail, especially the water meters the remaining water meters, the new ones, need to be installed, and by which date are we hoping to have that happen, and then how does that tie in to the implementation of the water billing software?
Through you, Chair, I guess I can answer this. So I believe there will be a more detailed report coming through Finance Committee regarding this, but just for this group. So the 2,200 meters that are a part of this program is effectively going to replace the remainder of the non-RF meters in town. So effectively, we are going to a gateway system where these will be real-time read through like a collecting tower, so to speak. The idea behind this basically is bringing in the ability for the town to give a more accurate reading, because we'll be getting data effectively daily, hourly, weekly, whatever it might be, as opposed to on a bi-monthly basis when we would drive by and pick up readings. That's also going to give the consumer or the residents potentially in the future to look at what their consumption is on a more regular basis. As far as the timelines for it, we are in discussion right now with the vendor for putting this all together. The plan, as far as I know, if there's any other delays, would be to have the meter installations done hopefully by the end of summer. And then the collecting tower shortly thereafterwards. I believe Finance through the Water Billing Department is hoping to have sort of January 2026 for the systems to be in place. I don't know what their frequency for billing and what the new billing cycle will look like, but the idea is to have the new infrastructure in place for that for January 2026. So.
And then my last question. On page 4, we talk about our capital water main replacement strategy, and the last and final 10 kilometers of our cast iron water mains, hopefully to be replaced, it says in the report, by 2035. Could someone just explain again why it's critical or important to replace the cast iron ones? And that's I guess, the first part of my question. And then the second part of my question is, if it is really critical, is there any way we can speed up that process? Or what, 2035 still is another 10 years away.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So the question about speed, it's, I guess, we've done traditionally about $2 million worth of capital improvements on water main a year. And we've kind of forecast that over the course of the next 10-year period, where we thought was a manageable target. We've had previous occurrences where we received grant funding for additional water main works, where we were able to double up years where we weren't able to do like $4 million worth of water main instead of $2 million. It almost killed our team, but we got it done. So, no, there is opportunities. I'm joking, but there is opportunities for where we have grant funding or whatever that where we could put additional monies towards that, and we'll try to chew off more. Obviously the big project is going to be the downtown water main project, and if we survive that one, which we will, that'll be a good what do you call it, measuring post for us to get past, or a hurdle to get past. This first part of your question was the importance of why. So typically, or traditionally, cast iron is obviously a metal pipe subject to corrosion, and over time that corrosion basically takes the metal and makes it smaller, more brittle, more subject to break. So typically when we do get water main breaks, it's normally on our cast iron water main. So replacing that with the new plastic pipe will help reduce those breaks. Cast iron water main is also the chlorine. The cast iron will actually eat the chlorine. I'm not using the right term, but the chlorine is less effective in a cast iron pipe than it is a plastic pipe. So again, for water quality purposes, it's better to get rid of that cast iron and bring in a plastic pipe. After we complete the cast iron, it will be into the next oldest pipe, which will probably be ductile iron pipe. So ductile iron is, I'm giving you a whole crash course here, 101. Ductile iron is a metal pipe as well, but it has a cement lining in it, which is better for water quality. So hopefully that answers your question. If you're willing to learn more, we can provide more information.
I'm always interested in more. I guess if I can put words in your mouth, the bottom line, though, is that there is no safety or risk issue to the residents who live and draw their water from these cast iron mains. It's simply a question of age and repairs and, getting the latest technology, I'll say.
Yeah, so just to echo that through you, Mr. Chair, I think, the importance of I think we've said it before, we have a rigorous system in terms of our safety net in terms of water sampling. So we do bacterial sampling once a week as a minimum all across our system. We do chlorine samples Tuesdays and Thursdays across our system. Anytime we're doing maintenance on our system, we have to do rigorous testing. So our dead end flushing program is another example. The fact that we have a quality management standard which outlines all the programs that we do that we report to council. I think someone said in the past, Ontario has the safest drinking water in the world, and I think that's true, and that comes as a result of, unfortunately, from historic situations in Walkerton and all this new standards and precautions came about of that tragedy, and has really put Canada or Ontario in the driver's seat in terms of high water quality standards. So hopefully that assures everyone that we do have those precautions in place, and we are proud that we provide clean drinking water to our community.
That really is the last of my questions. I just wanted to say thank you very much, especially for Appendix B. Really interesting charts and graphs in there that kind of give some trends and historical information. So thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you. I have Member Smink and then Councillor Howe.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of questions. One was about water main breaks, and I really appreciated the 10-year time frame on that, and also the breakdown by type. I think the cast iron pipes had the most breaks every single year of those 10 years. So even though it felt like, wow, we had big water main breaks last year compared to the overall 10 years, it actually wasn't a great number. They were at the same time at the end of the year. I was interested when you had your action item when you said that you would be looking at the temperature data. I wondered if you could give us a little bit more information about what you think you might be looking for.
Sorry, through you, the chair. That recommendation came from, if we have severe negative temperatures and their impact on water main that may be not at a deep depth, that may be affected by some of those rapid coolings. So that was kind of the thought process there of trying to correlate any significant dips in temperature with when we're having breaks occur on any type of pipe, for instance.
Thank you. One thing that did occur to me, as opposed to the point in time temperature, because the freeze thaw can really affect, the potential for breaks. Just looking at, even if it's, 3 days before, to see if there was a big swing in temperature as well. That was just a recommendation.
Yeah, great recommendation, and thank you. We have a few different data sources that we could pull some temperature data from. So, for instance, we could utilize a resource such as our road surface temperatures from our road patrolling to leverage what the surface temperature of the ground might be where the break occurred, or at least within a given area, and we could correlate that over several days.
And through you, and one more question has to do with, because, looking at the condition of our water mains, they can change, and I understand that sometimes the priority for when things need to be replaced has to move. So I was noting that you had said that Winston Road was going to be moved up, I believe, to 2026. I must admit, the alarm bells went off because I thought, oh man, that's when we're doing downtown. Do we have enough budget? Do we have enough staff? Does it have to be done the exact same year? So perhaps just in terms of our overall resources, if you could address that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if it was 2026. I think that if it says that, do you want to speak to that? Yeah.
Sure. Through you, Chair, through our discussions at the infrastructure review, topic of discussion came up about the breaks occurring at Winston Road just in this past few months, earlier this year, the end of last. Part of that discussion was the Winston Road capital replacement was scheduled for, I believe it was design in 2032, but we discussed moving it up to design in 2026, which I believe would put it in construction for 2027.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Through you, Chair, on the brakes, the two that were done by not us or not by nature, is there a cost recovery now? And I'm going to understand that if it's contractor goes in, hits it, we can't wait around for them to get Groves or whoever to come in and fix it. We've got to fix it. We got to go down the hole. But is there a cost recovery method that we can implement to say, hey, pal, you guys screwed up, you can reimburse us for some of our costs?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if I understand the question, it's like if we found issues where it was related to construction kind of thing?
We had two breaks that were construction.
Yeah, so construction-related costs, it depends on the scope of was it just through normal actions, like the contractor was just doing his normal duties and the pipe's over there, it's old, it's brittle, and it just happened to break, then we probably wouldn't go on after the contractor. If the contractor did something that was stupid and you know, obvious that, you know, you guys messed up here, then yes, we can do a cost recovery. So when we say construction related, it's with, I guess, like I would footnote that it's not necessarily relating to the contractor causing the issue or what's the word? Negligent or you know, doing it on purpose or stupidity or something like that. It could be just as a result of you know, we're building a new pipe next to the old pipe and the old pipe is brittle, and when we're doing our work, you know, the ground shifted and the water main break. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Howe.
If I can, this is more of a comment, Chair. We alluded or just briefly touched on Walkerton. And with a lot of the changes that I see, excuse me, I see coming down the pipe, that I'm afraid that the foot is going to be taken off the gas when it comes to water quality and all the lessons that we learned from Walkerton. We cannot ever, ever, ever forget what happened up there. Never.
Yeah, agree 100%. I think that maybe there is some evidence that in some places we may have overcorrected, but overcorrection is better than undercorrecting. And it was negligence there and people doing things that they shouldn't do that led to the problem. I think the process we have in place now where there is a system of checks, like constant monitoring is a great one. From an age perspective, how old are we talking when we talk about the cast iron? Because you mentioned the ductile iron. So what's the age that we're talking when we talk about cast iron? Is it like 70 or 80 years old? Is that what we're talking, like 1950s?
Sorry, through you, Chair. Just corresponding with my colleagues, the life of a cast iron water main would be about 45 years. However, we have pipes in the ground that are predating kind of the early 1950s that are still up for replacement.
Add to that, so that, for example, the downtown, I think it's 1957 cast iron, so.
Now, if I'm misremembering, there were pipes that we relined, right? Is that the ductile iron that you're talking about? Because I remember processes where we relined pipes in the past to extend the life rather than replacing the entire pipe.
Yeah, to you, Mr. Chair. So there are technologies, the ability to reline metal pipe or water main pipe. We traditionally in Grimsby have not done that. In terms of the relining, typically we keep that to like wastewater pipes and stormwater pipes. So there is that technology, but we haven't elected to do that in our town for the water main side of things. We will be relying on that technology heavily when it comes to the wastewater side of things.
Yeah, I'm probably thinking of the stormwater. Further to Councillor Howes and Councillor DeVos and everybody's comments, there was a New York Times article just last week that talked about the miracle of drinking water, of tap water. And we take it for granted, right? That when you turn on, and I talk to my students about it, you know, like I tell them, like, you know, a lot of the world cannot just turn on the water. The quality of the water in our toilets is the same as the water that we drink from. Like it's an incredible thing that we have, and I'm you know, the costs are high, so we can't pretend that they're not. And the costs are increasing year to year, but it is the most important thing that we do probably as a town from a health perspective and as a human rights perspective. Drinking water is a human right. So the last thing I wanted to say was I really appreciated the discussion and the questions. This is exactly why I wanted the committee's system to come back. I think that there's an educational component to the committee system where we're learning as a group and where we're sharing that knowledge. Members of of council that are on here are learning. We're able to bring that knowledge back to council. The better we all are, the better we all are. So every little bit that we learn makes us better as a group. And so this was a perfect example of why the committee system is important from a knowledge perspective. So thanks to everybody for that. I have a motion by Member Spink, seconded by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that report DPW 2510 titled 2024 Annual DWQMS Infrastructure Review Report dated May 28th, 2025 be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Correspondence. First item of correspondence we have tonight is from the Niagara Region. It's a memo in response to the committee request for further information on the decision to permanently reduce the speed limit in school areas in the town. Brandon, please go ahead and explain the memo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as at our March 26th Public Works Committee meeting, the committee approved a motion asking staff to follow up with the region with respect to speed limit changes associated with the community safety zone and the automated speed enforcement programs. Motion asked for clarification about the speed limit changes specifically in front of Blessed Trinity and West Niagara, our secondary schools. Also asked the region to consider other forms of traffic calming measures to help reduce speeds and enhance pedestrian safety. So as you mentioned, and as included in the correspondence, the region has provided a memorandum which provides some clarification about the changes, some further background into how the recommendations came about, and speaks to additional traffic calming measures, specifically signage, flexible bollards, pavement marking, etc., that will be used to aid in that traffic calming. So as outlined in the memo, the changes that the region will be implementing were addressed in a report that came to the Regional Public Works Committee on March 4th. The report was in follow-up to earlier direction from the Regional Public Works Committee and Council that asked staff to review signage related to their automatic speed enforcement cameras for effectiveness and clarity. And this was primarily to address feedback that they had received from the community relating to confusion about speed limits and associated signage in school zones. So staff subsequently completed the review and included their recommendations in the March 4th Regional Public Works Committee report. Those recommendations included 4 recommendations: amending the region's speed limit policy, establishing new criteria to define when school zones are to be established, as well as establishing new criteria to define how posted speed limits are established within those school zones, and ultimately updating their signage in the school zones to provide clarity and consistency. Recommendations also included removing the signs, the time-dependent speed reductions, so that would be the 40K flashing signs or 40 kilometers when flashing signs. And then there was also signage that was non-flashing but just used a date and time tab to limit when the 40 kilometer was in effect and not in effect. So ultimately, on a go-forward basis, all school zones on the regional roads will be either a flat 50 kilometer per hour or a flat 40 kilometer per hour zone. So the time-dependent situation is now been removed. The region's intent for the changes was to make the speed limits as clear as possible and bring consistency in how speed limits were being established within school zones on regional roads across the region. So not just Grimsby, but across the region. The region's memo further describes how the changes will impact or specifically in Grimsby. 5 of the schools in Grimsby along Main and Livingston corridor met the criteria for the 40 kilometer posted speed. So that includes the 3 elementary schools, Nels, Park, and John, as well as both of the secondary schools, West Niagara and Blessed Trinity. And also, as the central school has now been moved from Livingston Avenue to the former Grimsby Secondary School building, the section of Livingston no longer meets the school zone standard, and therefore the 40 kilometer per hour signs, in this case the flashing ones, will be removed. In the memo, it includes a diagram showing the enhanced signage that we placed in front of the school, or in each of the school zones. So again, it's trying to bring some more clarity and a standardized markings and signage regime to help kind of demonstrate those school zones. The region notes has noted that it will take some time for them to install the signage, so there will be a transition period where some of the signs have been changed and some locations haven't been. It's my understanding that they've hoped to have all the signs in place for the upcoming school year. So I think that provides a bit of a summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my knowledge, or if I need to, I can obviously go back to the region and ask for further clarification.
Thanks, Brendan. Questions for Brendan? Councillor DeVoley?
Thank you. Maybe just a comment or a suggestion to keep in the back of our minds. I think it's always good when we try to solve a problem, we come up with a solution, we implement the solution. I think it's always an important step after that, whether it be a year down the road or whatever, to re-look at the solution to see if it really solved the problem that we had identified. And so I guess my question is, do we have any sense from the region that a year from now, after they've made these changes, they have a willingness to relook at all of this to gauge the effectiveness of these changes that they're about to make?
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. So my understanding is, again, that the program has been determined to be effective. I don't think there has been any conversation about stopping the program or not having the program continue, as far to my knowledge. But in terms of the effectiveness, I mean, I can certainly dig into those details and provide that rationale or that information back. Michael Palumba, our senior transportation technologist, has probably been into more of the weeds than I have been, and he can certainly provide. He sits on a committee that has these discussions with the region on a regular basis too. So I can certainly bring that information back if that's helpful to the committee.
In that regard, I do see, some of the areas, some of the schools like Park and Nellis and so on have had the zones in front of them where you're supposed to go 40. But then we have schools like Blessed Trinity and West Niagara where the speed limit in front of those was always 50, and now they're reducing it to 40. So that is, I'll say, something new that they're proposing to do, as opposed to these other ones where it's a continuation of what we had before. And a part of me, and it is just my opinion, but I do find it amazing that in front of a high school, we'd go from 50 to 40. I always think of a high school as having probably half the population, 16 and over, and under our laws, they are allowed to get their driver's license, so we'll let them on a road with vehicles that weigh significant tons, thousands of pounds on the road, and yet then we get ourselves all tangled in a knot about we're going from 50 to 40 in front of a high school, and I think, well, these are adults. Like, they can drive a vehicle like I can. At which point in time do we finally say, adults are adults, So that changed, particularly with the high schools, I find to be a significant change from what the other school zones have in terms of speed. And I'd really like to see if the region finds there is any significant difference between what we had and what they're proposing to move to, and then eventually evaluating how they felt it turned out.
Thank you, if I may, Mr. Chair. So I can speak to some of this criteria that they use. So they did outline that in their report, which I've kind of dug into it a little bit. So basically, they define criteria that determines when they would consider it a school zone, and then they would also define criteria or a warrant that if you meet certain conditions where they would consider it, hey, here's where we need to drop it by 10 kilometers per hour. So, I think the triggering factor, well, that's the right word, on the high schools is the number of pedestrians that can be encountered in during the day. So they had said as one of their criteria that there's at least 100 student pedestrians walking to the school within a 24-hour period is what they had said. So it may not be that they're the age of them, it's the fact that there's 100 pedestrians present within that time period as where they provided as one of those criteria. So I don't know if that helps, but in terms of your question about, or your comment about, reviewing the data to make sure that it's an effective program, I think that's something certainly that we can dig into further on our side of things, and similar to like we did with the pilot program for the flexible bollards, right? We measured pre, post, and during to see how effective those devices were. So, again, maybe I'm ignorant in terms of the total effectiveness. I can dig into those details, but I'd certainly follow up with Michael, and he can maybe inform me and bring me up to speed a little bit better that I can relay back to you.
From my perspective, I'm fine with everything except for the always being 40 part. The reduction of speed during school hours, or a couple hours before and a couple hours after, absolutely logical. 50 kilometers an hour in front of Park School on Sunday afternoon, though, does not, or 40 kilometers an hour in front of Park School on a Sunday afternoon does not make sense. The example that I think of that I've dealt with for most of my adult life is Immaculate Heart near E.D. Smith in Winona, which my kids swam on the Stony Creek swim team 3 days a week, so I drove down that road 3 days a week. And during school hours, it goes from 70 to 50 with a flashing light. So they're getting rid of flashing lights. But flashing lights, I mean, I have to speak anecdotally because I don't know the data, but if they didn't work, they wouldn't be used, I would imagine. Flashing lights work for me, and I can imagine they work for everybody else. They tell you, it's a picture of kids walking across the street with the flashing light above it and below it. There's nothing that could be more clear to tell you to slow down. Another example is near where I work on the mountain in Hamilton, and that's on Mohawk. And Mohawk has multiple schools along it, and so when you're going by the schools, it reduces to 40, and there are flashing lights. And there are no cameras there, but people slow down, almost everybody slows down to around 40 because of the flashing lights and a school zone. If the goal is to actually reduce speeds, and again, if it's slowing people down, I have no problem with cameras. It's not the cameras. But if the goal is to slow people down, the flashing lights and the times make more sense than 24 hours a day of 40 kilometers an hour. Because I can tell you that there's a big difference between going 70 in a 40 at 8:30 in the morning on a school day than there is in going 70 in a 40 at Sunday night at 9 o'clock. Now, people might disagree with me, but there are going to be a lot less people on the road. The present danger, the children, all those things. You talked about the 100 people pedestrians. If that's the threshold, then that makes sense. Blessed Trinity has probably more pedestrians than the elementary schools because the catchment area for walking is larger for a high school than it is for an elementary school. If you have to walk from further away. So there are more kids walking to a high school than there would be for an elementary school. All that being said, again, in the evening, 40 kilometers an hour does not make sense on a collector road when there are less people on it. So that's my opinion. I can't convince the region of that. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just, maybe the one thing that just to help, something that I had to get my head wrapped around, and hopefully I'm just explaining this properly. So my understanding is they can't, the provincial rules under the changes say that you cannot have automatic speed enforcement devices in zones that are flashing 40 kilometers per hour. I think that's how I understand it. So what the region did was, in the areas where, I can't remember the specific school, it might be Park School. Anyways, there is an area where the flashers weren't in, but they reduced the speed or emphasized the speed, but to a 40 kilometers, and they used tab signs below it to dictate here's where the time change happens. And I think the feedback that they received through that is it's too confusing and I missed the tab, and so I'm getting this ticket. I didn't know it was 40. I didn't realize it. Why aren't there flashing signs? Because that's really effective. So they were caught in this position of, hey, we want to use these automatic speed enforcement cameras as a tool to reduce the speeds. The rules say I can't do that with a flashing sign, so our counter to that was to put time tabs on it, and they got feedback that it's too confusing. So the rationale for this was, okay, let's rethink this, and is if we I guess the what do you call it? The follow-up to that was to change them to a flat 40K. I can't speak to, the decision, but that's is my understanding.
That seems counterintuitive. That seems illogical that you can't have a flashing light and a speed camera because, but, yeah, go ahead.
I think that through to Mr. Chair, I think the challenge with the flashing lights has to do with having to prove that the flashers were active at the time where you got your ticket. So whether that means you need another camera up here showing that the lights are flashing while the camera caught you speeding, I think is the rationale behind it. But
okay,
yeah,
that's actually a fair explanation. Member Smith.
One comment and one question, please, through you, Mr. Chair. With that explanation, and this is all on the region, and I am not putting any judgment on our staff who are just trying to interpret what they're hearing from other professionals. I do think that the council may have had a different decision when they agreed to automated speed enforcement in the town of Grimsby if they knew that one of the implications was that 20%, and this is by my calculation based on how far upstream of each of the schools the current signs have been placed, 20% from town limits to Casablanca on Main Livingston is 40 in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the night, 24 hours a day. So there is a lack of transparency that I think the councillors may have had a different decision if they had understood that that's what the implication was. And I don't think that there's probably an opportunity for the town to now back out and say, okay, we don't want automated speed enforcement. Instead, we want to go back to our flashing signs. So that's my comment. My question has to do with the associated traffic calming measures. One of the things that was stated in the report was that the region might also implement flexible bollards. I just wanted to ask whether these would be consistent with the use of flexible bollards that the town has in our traffic calming measures. Would they be in the same locations? Would they be considering any bicycle lanes that are in place? Would they also be put up and brought down at the same time of year so that our winter maintenance aren't going to damage them? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So if you take a look, I can't share the report, but in the memo, they're in the very back page. I'm just opening it myself. There's a diagram that shows the typical setup for a school zone. And I think I've actually seen some of these markings have been put in. So what they're trying to do is standardize the road cross-section so drivers have a clear understanding when they drive in the region of Niagara and I'm entering a automatic speed enforcement school zone in the region of Niagara, here's what it's going to look like. So they've identified, where the 40-kilometer signs happen. They've identified kind of where no parking restrictions are in place, the school crossings themselves, if there's school crossings present, and they identify the in-road flexible signs. On the edge lines. So I encourage you to take a look at that. In terms of the taking them down, I'm sure that they're going to be dealing with the same situation where the flexible bollards can interfere with your snowplow operations or your winter maintenance operations. So they do have to come down in the winter and then they go back in the spring. But I can certainly follow up with them on that and just to ask for clarification.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments for Brandon? Okay. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence, please. Councillor Corstangi, Councillor Howe. Resolved that the correspondence from the Niagara region regarding the request for further information on the decision to permanently reduce speed limit in school areas in the town of Grimsby be received for information. All in favor? It's carried. Second and final item of correspondence is the asset management plan update. Brandon, go ahead.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Marvin on this one.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee. Just wanted to provide a bit of a teaser that the asset management plan is coming. Just wanted to give you an update on that. So I guess further to that, I guess just quick background, just to, I guess, there again, a little bit teaser that it's going to be coming before you. But the current asset management plan that we have is based on the current levels of service. So it's essentially the way that we're currently doing things. The plan that's going to be coming in before you, and it'll be coming on June the 16th to council, is based on the proposed levels of service. So the distinction is between the difference between, I guess, what we're currently doing and what we want to be doing. And that's important because then, based on that, the asset management plan establishes a cost to meet those proposed levels of service. So we've decided here's where we want to be. Here's the cost to achieve that level, and then the cost is compared to the current funding. So how much funding is available, and then basically it's just math after that. The difference between where we want to be dollar-wise and the current and the funding available is the funding gap. So that's kind of the meat of the plan that'll be coming before you. And then I guess finally, as a part of that plan will also include an update to the asset management policy, which is something that the regulations require that we do every 5 years. So, and then finally, I guess, achieving the presentation of the report to council and the ultimate approval by council will then fulfill our obligations under the regulation. So that's really, I guess, the big check mark that we need to achieve before July 1st. So coming before you June 16th, we'll achieve that compliance. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marvin. Any questions from Marvin? Councilor DeVoli?
Thank you. When I think of levels of service, I always think of easy examples like, should we be snow plowing the roads when there's, half a centimeter of snow or 3 centimeters of snow? And those are operating costs. So could you give me some examples of how changing our levels of service have an impact on our capital assets? Could you walk us through a few examples like that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, and that's a great question. So I guess I'll give you a couple examples. So one is for roads. So we look at roads based on condition, and the condition is they call it a PCI, or a pavement condition index, and it's really a scale, rating scale from 0 to 100. So what we've looked at is the current levels of service is what are our roads right now? So every road has a unique number, and you blend them together and you get an average pavement condition index. So we've said, okay, currently our pavement condition is X. Do we want to be better or worse than that? So we've established, and basically, and those are put into criteria that kind of everybody can kind of understand, from very poor to very good. So essentially what we've established in the report is we want to make sure our roads don't get worse. We really don't think we can afford roads that are all very good. So we've kind of set a level of about 70. So we said, okay, that's a reasonable level. It's kind of an industry standard. So to achieve that level, here's the amount of money that we need to do based on capital activities. So it's milling and paving, replacing the full road, reconstruction, those sorts of things. So that's how we get the cost. So if we spend this amount of money annually, we can then achieve a pavement condition index of, in this case, 70. So that's the setting of the levels of service. If we decide, well, no, we can't afford that for whatever reason, and that's obviously discussions that'll come after the presentation of the asset management plan, there's different choices. There's looking at ways to fund it, or you could then lower it to say, we're happy with living with roads that are at a 60. And that's a decision that can be made, but we had to set levels of service, and that doesn't mean that like any of us go to jail if we don't achieve those, but we have to set something, and then every year annually we will then kind of compare our success rate to those levels of service. So another example I can give you is for water mains, and we talked a little bit about that tonight, is our level of service that we're setting in the asset management plan that's coming towards you, or in front of you, will be, we want to replace all of our cast iron water main within the next 10 years. So we're at year 10, we should have 0 cast iron water main left in the system. The cost to do that is approximately about $2.5 million a year. If we would like to do that in 5 years, we can do that. We can essentially double the amount of money. Or if we say, that's really a lot of money, we can't, we don't want to spend that kind of money. We only want to spend half of that. Well, then we're looking at replacing it, in 20 years. So I hope that kind of gives you an example of what the levels of service compared to cost relationship is.
Thank you. I think what I'm really taking away from your comments is that the level of service will then determine our operating costs each year, but also have an impact on the life of our assets as well. And when I say have an impact, in determining when we will replace those assets down the road. So it's actually like a two-pronged impact, right? There's an impact on our operating budget once we decide on the levels of service, but there also is an impact on our capital replacement plans, because it may mean that we aren't going to be replacing them as often, as to use your example. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and yeah, another great question. So the operating is obviously a component of it. So I guess kind of like your car, to some degree, the more maintenance and care you take of your car, essentially the longer it should theoretically last. So, but there's a cost to doing the maintenance. So certainly the operating is a component of it. And you're right, extending the service life is really I'll say almost the most important, biggest thing that we can do is to try to make something last as long as possible. And doing, I'll say, routine maintenance and at specific appropriate times. So for example, roads, if you wait too long, then you can't just mill and pave it. Now you have to reconstruct it. So if you hit it at the right time, you can actually, it's costing you money more frequently, but over the life of the asset, it's actually saving you money. So yeah, great question.
And then my last one is, at the Finance Committee, at our last meeting, which was about a week and a half ago, maybe, we did have a report from our finance department that looked at the current value of our assets, both core and non-core, estimated their lives using a construction index, and then looked at basically how much we would need to set aside every year, compared that to what we currently are doing, and if anyone, besides my Finance Committee members who are here this evening, had an opportunity to read that report, it really shows that we are underfunding the replacement of our capital assets by over $7 million a year. That basically we would need to save over $7 million a year, more than what we currently are putting into reserves to be able to replace these assets when their life comes to an end. But I'm thinking that this analysis is just the first step, because and it will need to be fine-tuned, that once the levels of service then are, I'll say, defined, once we all agree to what they are, what I envision is that the Finance Department will then come back and refine this report again in terms of dollars and forecasts out and so on. And that basically we're going to keep refining to determine the underfunding that we currently are setting aside. Does that kind of tie in with your understanding of where you think we're going with this? Because the whole idea, although the province has mandated that we do certain things, of all the things the province has made us do, this is one of those that actually makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a lot of work, but it makes a lot of sense that we examine our assets, that we know what condition they're in, that we estimate their life, that we know how much we should be saving for it. And I know at the Finance Committee, we've said, we want there to be, our policy is that we want this town to be setting aside enough in reserve so that when certain things come to the end of their life, that we have the money available to fund it from, I'll say, past savings. And in certain conditions, we have outlined, the policy that we think should be followed as to when we would take on debt for it and so on, right? So what we've done at Finance is sort of set, I'll call it, the parameters or the fence that we should be living in. And now you are really helping us fine tune. I'll use a terrible example, but the cows, horses, and sheep that we have in the fence and how they're going to look, and when we replace our herd and how we do it, right? And at some point in time, these two concepts come together, though, that, the assets have to be replaced, and how much money do we need to do it, and what is the estimate, how much are we short, et cetera, et cetera. So Yeah, for better or worse, let me just say, I really think this is a good thing that the province is having us do, and having all of us do across the entire province. And I think some astonishing information is coming from it, some revealing information is coming from it, and some kind of sad information is coming from it too, because certainly the preliminary assets are is that we are terribly underfunded.
Member Smith,
Sorry.
Sorry.
did you want to, go ahead, Marvin.
Yeah, sorry, thanks, through Mr. Chair. I just wanted to try to answer that little question that you had in there. I think, and I don't want to give the end of the movie away, but the report that'll be coming before you is not, I'll say, as bad as I think the one that came through finance. And the biggest reason is the asset management plan, I'd say the detailed one, looks at the condition of the assets. And I think that's one of the big differences is the report that was a great report that came from finance to the committee, was essentially the math, looking at the replacement value and the service life and just doing the math. The asset management plan that will come before you in June looks at condition. So, and I'll give you an example, is we have several assets in the town that are beyond the end of their useful service life. So I guess if you put your finance hat on, they're really worth zero and they need to be replaced. The reality is a lot of them are still in good shape. So that asset management plan actually looks at the condition of the assets and then projects how much longer that they will, I guess, provide service. Because of that, the amount of, I'll say, gapping will be less. So that's the good news. And I'm trying to think if there was something else I wanted to throw in there. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, but hopefully that helps.
Yes, and I think that does, because of course it was based, what it really came down to was what's called the Canadian infrastructure rate that was used in there, and they were very standard rates, right? That were just applied to the classifications. And really what our detailed asset management plan now is going to give us is, I'll call it, more exact rates based upon the uniqueness of the condition of our assets, right? So in essence, this report will be fine-tuned, yeah, and hopefully the number and the gap will come down.
Go ahead, Marvin. Brandon, did you want to speak too?
Yeah, sure, if I can jump in. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, and Marvin, I'm going to look to you and you can correct me if I'm wrong. As I understand it, the asset management plan too is looking at a 10-year horizon, whereas maybe the finance report was looking at long-term. So that's why there's maybe some differences in the numbers. And I don't know sorry if I cut you off.
Yeah, and through Mr. Chair, the only other thing I wanted to add, which was what I had forgot, was the asset management plan, the real focus is to present what do we have, what condition is it in, how long will it last, set those levels of service, and determine the amount of money that you need to achieve those levels of service compared to the funding that's available. What it doesn't do is go into what I'll call like the financial plan. Okay, so here's the difference between where you want to be and where you are. The asset management plan doesn't really tell you how to get there. That'll be a follow-up, I guess, analysis and report. So is it, levy increases? Is it, more borrowing? Is it actually adjusting those levels of service? So I think that'll come later through the help of our finance team. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that this plan won't tell us how to get there. It's almost just telling us, here's where we are, and then we have to go to the next step.
Member Smith, you finally get to ask your question or speak.
No, fascinating discussion through you, Mr. Chair. I may actually even come to a council meeting on June 16th, so I can see it, or watch from home. The one thing that you had in this discussion was talking about potentially adjusting our level of service, and there may be an opportunity to stretch the capital costs over more time. certainly Town of Grimsby is not unique in having perhaps more of an infrastructure deficit. I think most jurisdictions in North America are in that state. It isn't only the operating costs and the capital costs, though. It's also like a service cost to the public. When we were talking about water mains and water main breaks, if we decrease our level of service, eventually we will have a higher number of water main breaks, or we will have more potholes that will, break more people's cars, which will, sue the town. There's not just those direct costs, there's also the costs, in terms of what is our quality of life, but, what is that overall impact on the public? So I just wanted to point that out, and you may have a comment on that as well.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. No, that's a great comment, and that's a very good point, because if you look at water main breaks, for example, so there's an obvious cost to having to get a contractor out or to do the repair ourselves. That's a cost, but the cost to the homeowners or the area of town that is now out of water and for a period of time, a little tougher to put a number to that, but that's something that has to be considered as well. So yeah, that's a very good point.
I do want to, I think that the town of Grimsby as a whole and our public works staff have done a phenomenal job over the years of maintaining the quality of our infrastructure so that it's not at a point where we have to be overly concerned about it. I think long-term planning is important, and I'm glad that we're doing that. But I think the status quo in Grimsby is pretty good, right? So when I look around the province, I can see places where the status quo is not adequate and where an asset management plan should show more money being put aside and an increase, because what you've done so far is not adequate. I think that what we've done so far is adequate. I don't want to reduce that, so whatever the funding that would allow us to continue what we're doing is what I would be voting in favor of. And this is a finance discussion, of course. But it's also important to recognize, I think, that not everything needs to be funded by reserves. When you're funding everything by reserves, that means, so if we as taxpayers are both funding reserves and paying for current infrastructure projects, that means the people in the future are living off of the reserves that people that are currently living here will never get to appreciate. I get that happens, and we plant trees that we'll never get to enjoy the shade of. That's what we do as a council as a whole. But there has to be a balance, and sometimes you have to take on debt for projects. So that's where we're going to have to find that middle ground. Again, I'm sorry for going off, because that's a finance discussion, and some of this is a finance discussion and not just a public works discussion. But I really appreciate your dumbing it down for me, Marvin, so that I can understand it, and so that I can understand the relationships between the things, the relationship between not funding and long-term costs, for example. Like, those are all important discussions that need to be had. And as a Public Works Committee, we're here to preserve the infrastructure. We're here to make sure that Grimsby's roads, Grimsby's water, Grimsby's sewers, all of the things that you folks do are done to the best that we could possibly do them. And I think so far, so good, in my opinion. You're always going to get complaints, but I can tell you, as somebody who drives through other municipalities regularly, if there's a pothole in Grimsby, it's on a regional road. It's not on a local road, right? So let's call the mayor and our regional councilor and let them know. I'm just kidding, of course. And I need a mover and a seconder to receive the verbal update, please. Member Rady, seconded by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that the verbal update from Brandon Wortman, Director of Public Works, it was really Marvin, regarding the Town of Grimsby Asset Management Plan be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Is there any other business pertaining to the committee? Councillor Howe?
Through you, Chair, I just wanted to catch it because it actually has to do with our next meeting. It's not other, it's the next agenda item. I wasn't sure. I wanted you to come to
The date has been revised.
Pardon?
The date's been revised, if that's.
Has it?
Yeah, Brandon has asked that the June meeting be canceled,
Yeah.
and we move the next meeting to July. So does
Yeah.
that answer your,
But-
go ahead.
July 30th. That's a Wednesday leading into civic holiday, like the August 1st weekend. It's the only meeting that whole week. Finances meeting, we've got a meeting the Thursday before that Wednesday. I mean, and at 6:30. So I don't know,
So-
maybe we can be a little bit more.
That's a good point. Do we want to leave the date to be determined? And then you can go back, look at it. As long as it occurs before the next council meeting, it's fine. So it might be the first week of August after the civic holiday, the Wednesday after the civic holiday. Do you want to speak to that, Brandon? Go ahead.
Why? You're going to keep talking.
I was going to throw in a joke. What would you rather do before your civic long weekend than have a Public Works Committee meeting? Like, I enjoy this, so I don't. Anyways, we can certainly take that back and see if we can switch up the date so Councillor Howe isn't interfered with his.
He's finally getting a holiday. No, but I appreciate you thinking of that on behalf of, even staff will be taking time off. So there are, the other business that I wanted to, oh, go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
Sorry.
So it's canceled?
So we
June is
looked at,
canceled,
canceling the June meeting, and then the July meeting, we'll figure out whether it takes place in early August or earlier in July. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce one of our new team members, Jamie Anderson. He's sitting by Marvin's left there. He's our new supervisor of infrastructure engineering. He'll be working with Marvin to support our capital projects and other duties as assigned. This is actually a second meeting with us, so I just wanted to make sure he could survive the first month before we introduced him, but he has survived. So. Supervisor of infrastructure engineering, sorry. I'm actually kidding, I forgot to introduce him the last meeting, so I'm making up for my mistakes now.
I'm pretty sure Jamie coached my kids in hockey when they were young. I got a picture of you when you were young in my house. So I'll send that. I'll send that to you. I'll send it to the staff. Welcome to the team, Jamie. The other new business that I wanted to bring up, Brandon, and it's related to Public Works, but also related to some of the other things going on in town. So we're currently undergoing a tourism strategy project in our economic development department. That, of course, overlaps with planning, and part of the discussions that have been happening are regarding to the downtown, because whenever we talk about tourism, we talk about the downtown. So all I wanted to say for new business was, I hope that staff in our Public Works Department is part of that tourism discussion that's occurring, because I think that the decisions that we make in the downtown will be a very important part of that tourism strategy and what we are able to do in our downtown from a tourism perspective. So that's all. Just I don't know if you want to say yes, we are already doing that, but that's what I hope is happening behind the scenes, because when we have these questions and I have this discussion with the consultant, the first thing I thought of is I hope that not me, but our Public Works staff is a very important part of this discussion.
I think, yes, we will be involved. I may have missed the first meeting.
Because there's talk of, the ability to close the road downtown. There's talk of festivals and those types of things. And all of those things are, sure, they're going to go through community services, because that's who says, oh, there's going to be a road closure. But when there's a road closure, the people who actually close the road are in your department. So it's important that and because we're redoing the downtown, the ability to put in bollards, for example, to avoid like ones that can be removed, stuff like that, I think is an important thing that we could consider. Yeah, parking, signage, transportation, all those things, yeah. Brandon, go ahead. Okay, we're good. So thank you, everybody. So the next Public Works Committee is scheduled for whenever Brandon gets back to us. The meeting's adjourned, and have a great June, everybody.